Good afternoon. It's Friday and it's late, getting out a little late. Had a marvelous early morning swim, swam a mile. And I really do believe, for those of us who like swimming, it reorganizes you in every way, psychologically and physically and so forth. And it leaves you just tired enough that you can still get a lot of work done. And I was reading transcripts today. But the bad news I have today, although it is the right outcome, I suppose, is that our small, aggressive Jack Russell Tiny passed on today. 16 years, all sorts of challenges in the final days. He was losing his eyesight, his hearing. He had certain kinds of pain. We had certain medicines for that. So he was fighting, but he couldn't keep it up. And we have another Jack Russell who's been a little funny today because this happened early enough in the day, and he's gone wandering. And my analysis is that he's looking for Tiny. Doesn't know where Tiny is. So, what about the larger news today? Well, earlier today I was so upset about the reports that we have presidential candidates suggesting they will grant pardons for crimes that I did a thing that some of you may have seen. And I cannot believe that anybody in America, even if they thought it, would say aloud that they would pardon the seditious insurrectionists that caused death and harm. And if they had succeeded, and they might have, they could have overthrown our government. And yet they go on as if, in their arrogance, they are blameless. There's a series of statements, I think, that allow us to work through this. You know, if you have crime, then you have law describing the crime. But if you have no law, can you argue you have no crime, that anything goes, and that chaos is acceptable as it is in a dictatorship? I think that is the model. I think that is the model that explains the misbehavior of people who would be president of the United States, talking about pardoning seditious people who sought to overthrow the government, when Article 14, Section 3 of the Constitution says if you take an oath to preserve the Constitution and then you oppose it, then you can be barred from public office. These guys should receive worse than that. They're lucky we don't throw stones in public plazas. But for these people, they are so far above the law that they continue to celebrate this stuff. And commentators endlessly discuss them doing it. And Justice Department is mute. See no evil, hear no evil. These guys, they should be driven out of town with these criminals who would compromise our democracy. But there we have it. There's some good news. The judge blocks the South Carolina abortion ban, which is for 6 weeks. In part, his theory is, let's see what the Supreme Court says, rather than allow this to go into law now with whatever problems it has. Those of us who remember Kissinger in his active days may be surprised to find that he is now 100 years old, and his son is writing about how his dad is kept active to encourage others to embrace their age as they get older. We won't talk about how we may have disagreed with Kissinger, but it does say something for what a stalwart he is to be active and alive. So, good for him. The study of space continues, and imagine this. This is the thing we don't talk enough about. A ship manages to get a sample from an asteroid that suggests to us that they have found what is a catalyst for life on Earth. Sometimes I imagine, some sort of super metallic, multi-mineral predicate for the elements we know today, and some like taffy spread through the nothingness, then dissociated as a mass into globs that spun, creating mostly round objects that become our planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto. Some disagree with who should be in that group. And but beyond that, and that we now have a telescope that chases the light to see what happened almost at the time of what we have posited as the Big Bang, by which this entire universe was created. So a Japanese team is responsible for this unimaginable achievement, and we don't focus on the heroes of the nations engaged in science, which continues to be in many ways a path through logic and judgment and ethics and law to a better world. But I don't know how to say it, but we have too many stupid people, too many morons, too many people who don't study and think about what's important, and don't have any respect for life or anyone else, because for them there is no law. There's no demeanor that's appropriate. There is no role for humans who are supposed to care with one another. Now, for those of us who believe in the value of life and respect for it, and would reach out for a stranger and help them, we can't understand these people, but they exist. As sure as I'm walking on a dirt road on a Friday afternoon, these people exist, they're out there, and they are the enemy. All this talk about we can get along and so forth, really, no, we can't. When we have within us, within our nation, people who would destroy, we can't ignore their objective and pretend as they pass us by and don't hit us with a cudgel that they are among us and that we are all the same. We're not. Yes, I believe all men are equal, all women too. But not everybody believes that, and those who don't believe it are walking past us and compromising us every day. Not something to lose sight of. In the category of, sounds kind of like a Darwin effort, as the plane was landing with 194 passengers on board, this passenger decided to open a door, and apparently he terrified people. Nobody went out the door. Normally you can't do it because these are pressurized cabins, and without the pressure, you or I, if we were sitting in an unpressurized cabin at a certain height, we would probably go unconscious because of the lack of oxygen. But as the differential between the atmosphere outside and the plane become close to each other, then this is not a problem, and so that wasn't a problem in that plane. The last issue is the hostage. We're all glad is a hostage in the sense that it identifies for us the enemy I was talking about, which appears to be the entire Republican leadership. Now, some will say that's harsh. How can you say they're the enemy? How can you say don't talk to them? How can you say these things? Because we're liberal, right? We respect everybody, no matter how they may want to hurt us, no matter how they may want to hurt our neighbor or everybody else. So tell me how we embrace men and women who are Republicans, who don't think a woman has a right to take care of her own body, to make decisions about it. How do we embrace people who would compromise Social Security? How do we embrace people who don't believe that we should help the poor? Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as brass and clanging cymbals. It's a paraphrase, but it makes the point. I don't care how beautifully you speak. If your actions are of a brute, we should call you out and recognize you, put a stamp on your forehead, and forever understand that you are not part of the human family when you would seek to destroy and compromise it for the short-term gains of being in office and having power and being carried to those jobs by Wall Street and whatever other hidden forces propel you in our political system, showing the defect of our political system, showing the cowardice of our system when our elected representatives show no courage to talk back against it. Now that's something. So McCarthy is hostage to these people. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's take the short term. In the short term, it means that when this deal comes forward, that is on the debt limit, what are we going to look at? Well, the people in the Freedom Forum, or whatever they call themselves, the caucus within the Republicans in the House, what's going to happen is they're going to say, oh, we don't accept that. So how does McCarthy get past that, remain the Speaker, although he granted them a trigger at which they could at any point challenge him, and we settle the question of what we're going to do about the debt limit? Well, the answer is not simple, but it goes like this, in my opinion. And no one's told me this, but there are only a few pathways through this thicket. And the pathway that I see is, without saying it and being surprised by it, McCarthy is going to have to get Democrats to agree to the solution. So McCarthy has to make a calculation. How many Republicans can he lose in his caucus with how many Democrats voting? Well, it'll only take a handful maybe. And then they may fire his ass. So that's a wonderful tragedy for those guys. It would say to the world, if they analyzed it the way I did, that even McCarthy can't go the distance on all the things that the Freedom Forum and these other crazies want. So that's what I got on my mind today. And I hope you have a good weekend. Be careful about the traffic. I don't expect to go far myself. It's going to be impossible out there. Sit at home, have a Mai Tai, look out the window, do whatever it is that you do when you actually relax. So I say, have a good weekend from my Cathedral of Trees, and I look forward to talking to you probably tomorrow and the next day. Bye-bye.